What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. It's more story time. I'm Scott Weatherly, and as always for this, I'm joined by Tony Farina. Tony, how are you doing? You all right?
I'm staring out my back window,
Yes.
longingly at the neighbors. Yes, I'm very well. Thank you.
Good. Yes. But you're right, we are continuing our short story movie, story time.
Yeah.
We've done a couple of different bits and pieces, mostly sort of like sci-fi and some of the things. This is a bit more, we're in the thriller territory. I'm going to just come out with it. We're doing It Had to Be Murder, a story that I'm pretty sure very few people have heard of, by Cornell Woolrich, and Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock.
Which everybody's heard of.
Which everyone's heard of.
Whether you've seen it or not.
Yeah.
My wife saw it for the first time last night. And I was like, hey, have you ever seen Rear Window? She's like, And she has a complicated relationship with Hitchcock in that she understands that he likes to leer at blonde ladies and is a bit of a sexist. So as a blonde lady who's a lady, she's like, she also, because he's not as bad as like some other filmmakers, he's not as he's not a monster or anything. He's not.
No.
But he definitely, it's on full display when we talk about the film. So that is always her reticence about Hitchcock and his leering at blonde ladies. But she does really enjoy, another one we could do, of course, is The Birds.
Yes.
And he had that weird crush on Daphne, himself. Like Hitchcock loves short stories and he liked Daphne in general. And if you've read The Birds, I assume.
I have, yes.
Nothing like that movie.
No.
He's like, different. I read this and I want to get Tippi Hedren in this. What do I got to do? She can't do a Scottish accent.
Yeah,
here we go.
That's the first thing I was going to say. The first thing is, it's not in America. It's like, yeah.
I know. Amazing. But anyway, yeah, so this is exciting. This is the cool thing about this is like, this all started obviously because of The Racer, which most people didn't know. Everybody knows Death Race, but nobody knew. And so I think this is what's cool is like, there's short fiction that's out there. These stories exist, that Die Hard 2 was based on a short story.
58 minutes.
58 minutes. I know. And it's so, and I know you've gone through all of those. People check the archives of 20th Century Geek for his Die Hard series, which is excellent, by the way. But yeah, so I think there's this amazing thing. So this is fun for me because I didn't know. I mean, I'd seen Rear Window. I did not know it was, and it says it right on the opening credits. And if you're not paying attention, like I saw it when I was a kid, I hadn't watched it probably 30
But that
years.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like the amount of films that are clearly based on short stories or novels, and you'll sort of see it like based on whatever, and you sort of, because it's in the opening credits, you sort of glaze over it, don't you? And then you'll see it in an article, or someone will tell you later on, you go, "What? That was based on a book or based on a story?"
Yeah,
and you'll go and find out. Like again, I was what. I don't know, it's only been the last sort of probably in the last 10 years, maybe a little bit more, that I knew that Die Hard was, but was based on not only a book.
Roderick Thorpe.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes. And also it's a sequel book, and
the detective.
There's the detective, which is so there's a whole legacy of things there. So it's amazing.
Right,
so,
that's the Sinatra that they had to offer Die Hard to Sinatra first because he plays the character
80s,
in the first,
which is mad,
which is amazing.
Yeah.
But it would have been.
It would have been a very different film.
I'm so glad they didn't make. Have you ever read that novel? Yeah, it's that that character is a lot different. So actually, if they had made a true adaptation, Sinatra actually would have been pretty good.
Yeah, I always think whenever I read it, I see them as being like, if it had got like late 80s Clint Eastwood would have been like perfect for that character.
No, it's true. It's true. And you know who wasn't probably up for John McClane? James Stewart. Probably not.
I was just saying, good
Not
pivot. Well
stage.
done.
Yeah. No, it's true. But it's funny though, because when it shows up on the screen, it says James Stewart, and Lee's like, James Stewart, because you always think of him as Jimmy.
Jimmy Stewart.
Like we're all his friends. Yeah. Even though that's always his name, everybody calls him Jimmy Stewart. So it threw her off for a minute too, because there's like this whole thing, like, you forget that Jimmy Stewart was a badass. Honestly, if they had made Die Hard back in the day, he made so many Westerns. He was totally a tough guy so many times.
Yeah.
So you forget that he could have pulled that off. And there's a few times in this where sun's out, guns out. And he's, he's in his late 40s in this film. Still in great shape, still, he's the silver fox in this and everything. But, but it is just funny to think he probably could have, he's just so big.
Yeah, he's a tall guy.
Such a big man that, he couldn't have been crawling around in the things. But I do think, it's interesting that I agree. I think 1980s Clint Eastwood would have been a great thing, but 1980s Clint Eastwood was a derivative of 1940s Jimmy Stewart.
Oh yeah. And you say Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart's an interesting actor because, the guy's got range. Like I've always liked, like you say, he can play. He's played hardened characters. He was I believe he was in the army or the air force. Like he literally sort of quit acting to go into the army during World War II. He played like those westerns, who shot Liberty Valance and done a whole bunch of stuff. But then you sort of think, oh, but he also did It's a Wonderful Life, so he can play sort of like that soft
and
character.
Philadelphia, which is
hysterical,
also rampantly sexist, but also really funny. And the film version of that, like, she produced that herself. That was her way back into Hollywood, was to raise them. Like she had kind of been blacklisted for her relationship. Her being herself, and Katharine Hepburn just being unapologetically herself. So she kind of moved away, but she and Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart stayed friends, and so she did that Philadelphia Story as a play. And she's like, "I'm going to buy this. I'm going to make the movie." And because they were her friends, and they were like, "Let's do it," and he won an Oscar for it, Jimmy Stewart, for that. And he's amazing in that. I mean, he's playing second fiddle because Cary Grant's over there.
Yeah.
But he is got range. He's funny, he's charming, he's hardened, he's scary, he's a bit of a dick in this. It is. And because you just always think of him as, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Like, I don't know what it is, like, that has become his personality. Like, that film has been tied to him. But I don't know anybody who's seen that movie.
No,
me. You know what I mean? It's
I agree. I know 100%. 100% know what you mean. Like, he sort of got in pop culture. He's kind of, whenever they spoof him or they sort of parody him, like, he's been pigeonholed as that, but he's not. He's a lot more than that, which is definitely true. We will get to him because we'll get to more to the cast and some of the a lot more to talk about the film. But first off, let's talk about the story. That is, It Had to Be Murder, by Cornell Woolrich. And as we said, like, didn't know this existed. It's dense.
Oh, there's a lot of words.
Yeah,
in 13 pages. It packs a punch.
It does. There's a lot going on, but also this reading the story. I'll get onto it. Reading the story made me realize something about the film, which kind of sort of not unnerved me, but made the film better and made it more sinister and more sort of disturbing. Yeah. Because the book, the novel, sorry, so the short story, it's 13 pages. 1942.
Yeah. That seems right. Yeah.
So it's a hard. It's like a hard-boiled, non-detective story.
It is, because it's written in first person. And I have to say, we've talked about this before, and nobody will ever start a story better than Shirley Jackson in the history of the world. But this guy's trying. I didn't know their names. I'd never heard their voices. I didn't even know them by sight, strictly speaking, for their faces were too small to fill in with identifiable features in the distance. What an open, like, oh, what the fuck is going on? Like, so good. And writing it in first person, it is very noir, very, hard-boiled, pulpy detective. You know what's happening right from the jump. So I love that opening. I think it was so. I think your description is spot on. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's a non-detective detective, which those are kind of fun, right? When it's an accidental detective, or when you like you accidentally solve a murder or whatever, because it's like you stumble into it. But like he's trapped. He's got nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about this one is, and it's more so in the novel, more so in the story than in the film, is the fact of, like, halfway through that you're reading this, like you say, it's not that long, but halfway through this, you're still not 100% sure that a murder has actually happened.
Right. You don't see anything.
You don't see anything, and I know that's in the film, but like you sort of know that it's a Hitchcock film. It's gonna have the payoff, but with the story, like it's him with cabin fever. Like he's trapped in it. You know, he actually says at the beginning about how all he can do is get from his bed to his chair, and that's about it. Like he's gone a little bit stir crazy, and so you're not entirely sure for probably the majority of this book if he's not just like making up stuff in his head.
Right. He is and I think making it a first person unreliable narrator is really important. I think that changes the layer of thing where it again, Hitchcock casting Jimmy Stewart, America's hero, America's princess. You know, like it was different. Like he was showing you by casting Princess Grace and she wasn't Princess Grace yet, but she might
Grace
as well
Kelly.
have been. Yeah, the princess that she was. And you know, so like you're casting sort of royalty as the heroes and Raymond Burr as the villain. Like you're not like he's telling you.
Oh, it's advertised. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So you know, but you're right. In this first person unreliable narrator, like what the fuck is going on? And I agree. I read it twice, and I just was rereading it before we started because I was like, it plays with your head. It's so well written that it makes you talked about its denseness, and it's so intentional, long running sentences on purpose to lead you astray. It's very well constructed. It could piss somebody off pretty easily and be like, fuck this, I don't even know what's happening. But that's you gotta work, you gotta grind it out because there's a payoff.
Well, I think one of the things I would say is about that sort of the density of it and that sort of long sentence structure, short sentences, long sentences, like there's a pace to this. And because it's first person, it feels almost like a train of thought. Like he's telling you the story, but there's moments when there's sort of you feel yourself reading faster.
Oh, you're right. You do
because he's like figuring it out, and then like you know, and you're going like yeah. Like there's a whole bit with the trunk, and he starts putting it together, and there's a large trunk, and he's watching through the window. He's watching the husband of
Lars,
Lars, who's his wife has gone missing.
It's definitely Lars.
Thormwood. Lars Thormwood.
Thormwood. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. There's emotion. He just sees all he can see is there's emotion behind one of the blinds. He can't tell what it is, and he's trying to figure it out. And he gets and then he's like, and then it sort of slows. He's like, oh, he's taking dresses down off. But at the moment you're like this irregular motion. You're led to believe he's dismembering a body, and so it's sort of like the pace quickens, and you're like the weight is written, and then it's like, oh, he's taking dresses out of a wardrobe and he's putting them into this trunk. And it's just like there's bits like that where your heart gets beat, and then it sort of like brings you down again, and then sort of like it just does that, and it's so well constructed. We're like, this is a really tense and dense story. That I was sort of like you say, I can see why you say, well, people would be pissed off because you got to stick it out. Like it pays off, but you got to stick it out.
Well, and that's why it works as a short. Like you couldn't write a whole novel like this.
No.
Like there are. Like Virginia Woolf writes like this, right? You're like in her head all the time, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? And but she also knows even her novels are short. She's like, you can't do this.
Sustain that. You can't sustain that. No.
Right. Like Mrs. Dalloway, you can't hang on to that. Like that is such a mess. And I love it. Her. But it's also exhausting. Faulkner is that way. A lot of the Russians are that way. Melville is that way. We're just like, what the fuck is going on? But it's intentional. They're playing with you, and it's only because their skill as a writer. And what he does really well, there's a moment like top of page 5 in the version I'm looking online where he stops, and like you talked about the way the pacing, and he goes through a list, and you really speed up when you're going through the list because like you're with him.
Oh yeah, his points.
Yeah. Here's these points. And he's like, 1, this, 2, this. And you're just like, and in your mind, you're like keeping up with his train of thought. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then you're like, stop. And then he's canceling himself. And he even says, but then it came up against 7. I hit a stumbling block. So you as a reader are like, and I don't know. I've never heard of this guy. I mean, I haven't reached out and started reading more because I didn't want to temper what we were doing here. But I'm definitely going to try to find more of his stuff because if it's like this, it's totally going to be worth it. And I can see where Hitchcock could be like, oh, and I know Hitchcock didn't write the screenplay, but, it's a Hitchcock film. You know,
Yeah.
it's not one of those things. Nobody comes up to Hitchcock and is like, "Hey, boss, you want to read this play?" He's like, "Hey, you are going to turn this. I'm going to buy this, and you're going to write it, and it's going to be to my specification."
Oh
And
yeah,
that's how it,
he's
you know.
well involved in the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not like Carpenter, where Carpenter, as we talked last time, where he wrote the script under a different name. It's not. It's not that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, and so that and there is, and then sometimes there'll be no dialogue for a page and a half, and then it's like nothing but dialogue. And one sentence paragraphs. Like, no, that wasn't it either. Immediately after the trunk had been dispatched, the trunk, that did it. Like, those are each paragraphs.
Yeah.
Whereas the paragraph before that is like this long monstrous thing. So again, it's well paced. And again, I don't know how this one didn't. Do you think it's because of the film this didn't hold up? Like, would this be lottery adjacent?
No. I think,
I mean, it's nothing as good as lottery, but you know what I mean? Like, would this be in Great American Short Stories?
I don't know.
Think so?
There's two reasons why I don't think it would, and I think it's a shame, because I think this does stand up.
Yeah.
The first is, I think, because of the density of it. Like, it's a pulp let's say non-detective detective story.
I love that. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Officially now you've created a genre. So say Scott forever.
But it's also incredibly dense. So it's not like I'm thinking like a Raymond Chandler, or sort of like Dashiell Hammett, or you could sort of jump in. It's pulpy, it's noir, it's that thing. Like, you can sort of like, it's all a bit overly macho. This is actually like almost there's a psychopathy to this. Like, this guy's clearly like, there's a slight madness to this book, to this story, that I think, it's not designed to be fun, if you know what I mean.
No, right? Yeah, it's not a romp.
Yeah, so there's that.
Right. Whereas, like, you're right with Chandler in particular, because Philip Marlowe is always cracking wise and whatever. You're right. There's a charm to him, even when he's getting his ass kicked. He's still like, well, blah blah blah, and I lit my pipe. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
But the other thing as well, this genre, I don't think it gets overlooked, I think. Because again, I think it gets lumped in with certain things, and so I think it gets sort of overlooked as, it's just a short thriller or a detective novel. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, people would consider it to be throwaway, especially with the title. Like, it had to be murder. So it sounds like the kind of thing that's going to appear in sort of Reader's Digest or something like that. So I still think it would have been forgotten. And I think Rear Window overshadows it, no doubt. But having done this, I'm glad that we were like, oh, actually, this is why I love doing this, because often you find something, you're like, oh crap, this is amazing, this is really good.
It is, and it really is really good. I am, and I think too, because it's funny that you mentioned, we mentioned Chandler. So I recently finished all of the Marlowe books. I'd only read a couple of them, and it was really, not, so I read them in order, and then at the end I read all of the collected short stories. That, so it's like they put out the 7 books, and then the 8th one is the collected short stories. So those actually kind of are published before, during, and after the 7 Marlowe books. And those are great, and I can't recommend it enough. But again, those shorter ones, the shorter detection stories, Rex Stout did this too. He did the Nero Wolfe books, and obviously, Poe and Doyle wrote shorts. Like, you forget that most of the Sherlock Holmes ones are short stories. Short. All of Poe's detective fiction, we name in America the Edgar Award is named after Poe. Like, for the greatest detective story of the year is named after Poe. People forget, that he did that. That he invented the detective story, and they were short. And when you go back, you're like, son of a bitch! Like, this guy does it. The payoff is good. It's right in front of you. Everything that you need is there and there's even a line about your eyes playing tricks on you. But he told you earlier that it was happening. Then you have to go back. And you're like, fuck, he did. And I think that's what makes it pay off. Is like such a skill, this dense, the short little thing to say, I'm going to pull this off. And so what it reminded me of, and again, you're saying it gets lumped into that, but this is harder than the stuff I write. Yeah. It's harder than, like, this is difficult because you're saying, I've got this many words and I have to commit a murder, solve a murder, and prove, and actually it can't be deus ex machina. It's got to be proven. I got to show it. And he does it. And that is a real skill. And it's really funny that you say it's lumped in with those things. And here's the questions, Scott. And again, I think this is important too, as we'll talk about Hitchcock too. What is up with if it's popular, it has to be shitty?
Oh yeah, no,
What
100%.
is that? What is that?
Pop culture is it's the pop in pop culture, isn't it? Which I know is supposed to be popular culture, but
Yeah.
it means everyone. It's that consideration of like it's got to be accessible to everybody, and that sort of means it's got to be easy. And
Yeah.
and
But people think that, so therefore, if it's
Yes.
popular, so people think that, but that's not true. Like it is accessible to everybody, but it's layered, and so because people say it's accessible to everybody, that's thank you. So that's what it is. People say, oh, it's pop, it's accessible to everybody, so it's like a Supreme song. So it's the Supreme, like the Supremes aren't as good as the Beatles. Okay, sure, they're different, but you know what? Those harmonies are fucking amazing, and I except for like 3 other air quote girls groups, there's nobody who pulls it off. Like the En Vogue comes close to the Supremes. Like what they're doing is hard. And that is amazing. But because you're thinking like baby love, well, that's a great song and it makes you feel a certain way and it's written in a really distinct way and it does all the things that it's supposed to do. And it's still good just because everybody likes it.
This is where you and I think, you know, and other people, I think within our sort of like, especially in our sort of quite close sphere, like there are people in that sphere that like, there's the pop culture, like, you know, we all talk about, you know, stuff we love the comics, we love the movies, but we've all got like the stuff on the periphery. Like we are those sort of, I'll call us proud nerds that have on the periphery.
Yeah.
They talk about, especially about short stories, like, you know, I've got my weird fiction, so I've got in front of me, like, you know, yes, I love Lovecraft, right?
Sure.
But like Lovecraft to me is the mainstream. Like, you know, not everyone's read all of Lovecraft because he's sometimes quite dense to get into. But I still think of like, I'm just looking at what I've got, you know, Robert Aikman, William Hope Hodgson, you know, you go off onto these other sort of bits and pieces, E.F. Benson. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to go off and they're the ones I want to read because like, not everyone's reading this. They've sort of forgotten, but then, you know, they shouldn't be. And so, you know, there's this thing of like, you know, they are a bit harder work at times, but there's a reason for that because, you know, they're doing something different. Like there's a reason for the structure. There's a reason why like the payoff is amazing. So you sort of get through that to get to the experience or of reading it. And I feel like that's what this is.
Yeah.
Like this is that thing. There's a scene in particular in this, but it happened a couple. There's a theme in this that happens that really disturbed me. Right. And this book,
I want to hear it. Yeah.
And it made me think about the film. This is what made the film darker for me. So in this, it's more of a high-rise situation, right? So he's looking at a more high-rise situation, and they've got these blinds down. So there's these roller blinds covering up, and it's the one in the bedroom. And I've watched Rear Window a number of times, never really clocked this in my head. I was like, oh, the bedroom's always down, the body's in there. And it wasn't until sort of like reading this, and there's a particular thing where like he keeps sort of saying that the guy is moving around the apartment. And then he sort of says the whole scene where he says about going to bed. He thinks the wife's ill.
Right.
So he's deduced in his head, oh, the wife's just ill and he's doing this stuff. He's sending her off because she's going off to the country to get better, that sort of thing. So he's packing some clothes for her. And all the lights go out and he's like, oh, he's like, oh, bless him. He's snuck into bed, you know. And all of a sudden he's looking through the living room window. It's dark and he just sees a match lighting a cigarette. And he's like, what's he doing in the dark, smoking? And he realizes he's sleeping on the sofa. And then he's like, that's when he starts to question. And then when he sort of realizes he's murdered, and in my head, I'm going, oh, he's feeling like this guy's really disturbed because the body is still in the bedroom.
Yeah, he is.
And and I did not clock that for the whole of the story. I'm going like, and then I'm watching going back and watching bits of Rear Window, and I'm like, and Raymond Burr is wonderful at this. And as I watch back, there are moments he looks towards
us.
No, looks towards the bedroom. So he looks like across.
Oh, yeah. No.
And I'm going like, oh, like, because they show here, they sort of suggest that he's dismembered the body and all this.
Correct. Yeah.
In the film. But I'm like, oh, like there's something still in that room. Like he cannot go in there yet.
Yeah.
And
it's like the guilt. It's the, you know, very Poe, right? It's the heartbeat under
telltale
the
heart,
telltale heart, yeah.
But in this, it was in the book, in the story, that it really hit me when I was like, you know, whatever the reason for the murder, you know, we'll get to it, but whatever the reason for the murder is, like, he's not like a psychopath. Like he's not gonna have done it and then he's carrying on his just like this is really, really disturbed this guy. Like he's really upset by it in some way. Like he's barely holding it together kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that just makes this even more like, there's this darker, there's just sort of an edge to it that really kind of got under my skin.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I think, it is dark. And there's also, you could flip it though and say it wasn't planned. It was the after.
Oh, it's a crime of passion, kind of like
premeditated. Yeah. But there is also the thing with the girlfriend in here. So that's again. So who's telling the truth? Is Lars? Is Lars and his new girlfriend? Did they plan this? And he's guilty about it. Like he was like, if she would have just divorced me, I wouldn't have to kill her. You stupid broad.
Yeah.
Is that what Lars is thinking? Or was it a crime of passion? And she finds out about the girlfriend and she tries to hit him and he stops her. And because we think she's sick, but she's definitely smaller than him, regardless whether she's sick or not. There's a size difference between them. And again, great casting with Raymond Burr, who was, by the way, younger than Jimmy Stewart at the filming of that film, which there was a 0% chance you'd believe that when you see Raymond Burr in that movie. He is definitely a sweaty mime in that. He only talks like 3 times the whole thing, but he is looking bad. But so it gives you that idea of, is it a crime of passion? Was it premeditated with the new girlfriend, or is it now that he's done it, he's like, oh shit. And is the girl, and again, unreliable narrator. So is that really a girlfriend? Is it just like somebody, he's like, hey lady, I'm going to give you this 20. You're going to go up and you're going to say this. Don't ask any questions. There's another 50 in there for you, whatever, you don't know. But he is, again, just like you said, he never sees it. All of this is just him filling in the gaps. He thinks, oh, she's sick. And so she's off to the country and whatever. He doesn't know anything. He even tells you, and he tells you in the most true thing he says is in the opening line. I don't know anything about these people.
No.
I don't know their names. I can barely make out their faces. Because it's not as close as it is.
All right, and that's a really good point, because one of the things that happens later, which again they do in the film, so the film follows the plot of this relatively closely till sort of the end. There's beats and stuff. But one of the things is that like, in order to get a reaction out of him, like he gets a note, because again, it's the Grace Kelly girlfriend in the film, but he just has sort of like a friend in this.
Yeah, they split her up. It's Sam who's his so he's injured, and so Sam comes over and kind of brings him his food and brings him his breakfast and gets the paper. And in the movie, it's Stella who's the insurance company nurse, which that is a weird thing. I have been visited by an insurance company nurse before when we got life insurance, like they have to come. That's not what they do. Just for the record, in America,
they're not that friendly.
Not at all. When they came in and they did this stuff to Lee and I for us to get our life insurance, it wasn't that. They're not making you eggs and stuff. They're like, sit down, do this. They hate their job. They're driving around. I mean, they're fine. Nursing is not. Anyway, so they split it up into Stella and Lisa.
Lisa,
they
yes.
Split her, they split Sam into two characters, but he needs help. Because like you said, you mentioned earlier about the macho-ness. He's not.
No,
he can't be. No matter what kind of great shape he's in or whatever, he's trapped, and so he's got to rely on the help of others. So Sam is just like some guy from around who brings him his breakfast. And
just
so
a friend.
Ropes this poor guy in.
And he sends him over to.
He said they've been friends for 10 years.
Yeah, but they're kind of like friends that are kind of like they're still friends but kind of tired of each other a little bit.
Yeah, that's it.
He sends him over with the note, doesn't he? That just says, "I know, basically, I know what you did," and then he follows it up with the phone call, and again, sort of like to get his reaction. And I love the bit he's watching him to get the reaction, and he sees the reaction. He's like, guilty. Like he watches that reaction. He's like, he's guilty, and then but instantly he's like, but I can't tell the police because he's got a friend who's a policeman, a detective. He's like, well, I can't tell him because he'll think I can't just say. But the look on his face. So he acknowledges that he still needs like hard evidence. But this is off the back of his detective friend has, without a warrant, I want to just note, has gone into this guy's apartment and had a look around and been like, there's no evidence. Like, there's nothing going on here. Like, there's nothing to investigate. We've actually sent somebody up to look for the trunk. They've seen the trunk. There was nothing in it. We've even met Mrs.
Thorwald.
We've met her, but he's still like, no, I'm not crazy. Like, there's something going on here, and this guy's guilty. And so it's that little bit of madness, isn't it? Where he's sort of like,
Yeah.
he's not willing to believe, like, reality, everything in reality is pointing to the fact that there is no murder. But
Yeah.
he's like, no, I know better. Which is, I think, as you were saying about Lee, she was saying that, like,
Yeah.
Jeffries is a bit of a dick in the film.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
'cause
he's
the
a bit of
line
a
that he
dick.
says in this too, but yeah, because in that line where he says, "Oh yeah, send a better detective."
Yeah.
Like, dude, I'm breaking the law. I'm a cop.
Yeah.
I'm doing all this shit for you. That translates from book to movie, and you're like, maybe he's not a great cop. You know what I mean? Like, you're
Well, it's kind of like, I like the fact that, like, it translates to sort of a bit more like banter in the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
But there is still that sort of, like, there's a snidiness to it that I think, like,
Well, I know everything.
Yeah. And the detective's just sort of giving him a bit of a Boyone is sort of just going like, look, I'm giving you some time of day, but I've got real crimes to solve.
Because you're my friend who's trapped in this. You've been trapped here for weeks. I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
It starts as he's humoring him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it does go around and
Scott, it had to be murder.
Yes, exactly.
So
Let's talk about the ending, though.
Yeah, please.
I
think it's a great payoff.
Yes. Do you think, and this is what I want to say, do you think this is a better payoff than the film?
Yes.
Mm.
I do. Because he solves the crime. I mean, he sort of does it in the film, but then that's just a red herring. Where he's like, you got to look at your eyes, got to see here, and they're doing, because he's a photographer, so they're doing that scene.
Yeah.
The payoff in that, so people, listen, if you haven't read this yet, pause now. We're about to tell you how he solves the crime at the end. So it turns out that the building, and they're trying to add dropped floors.
Yes.
And so they're pouring concrete. And so the building is built in a way that he didn't notice that when you go from the living room to the bedroom, you step down, which means every floor has a step down, which means when you're in your bedroom, the ceiling is lowered.
Yes.
And so and he didn't notice it. And so it takes him a bunch, and he's seen it several times, and it's only so that's how he realizes.
Well, he says it at one point. He sees two people walking. Is it like an estate agent and a tenant walking about? And he says, "Oh, there's something off."
Upstairs, and the one upstairs. Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, there's something off," but he doesn't quite clock what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that the floor steps down, which means if the floor steps down, that in the bedroom, you could reach into that floor. So the body is actually upstairs. It never leaves the building. Which
is why he can't go in the bedroom.
Correct, because like you said, the body's still in the bedroom, but it isn't. So that's why when Doyle, what's his name in this? It's Doyle in the one, and Boyle goes in, and when Boyne goes in and he checks, there's no body, there's nothing there. And when Sam sneaks in, there's nothing there. They can't find the body because it's not technically in that apartment anymore. No. So good. I thought that was really like, Dame Agatha Christie would be like, bro.
Oh no, that's almost like a what is it like? That's like Edgar Allan Poe with sort of like walling somebody up in the
Cast of Amontillado,
that sort of thing,
or the Purloined Letter. The Purloined Letter, right? That was the one. It's like right in front of you the whole time, and you just can't see it. That was it exactly. Yeah.
So I think I do agree. I think the payoff in the book, in the story, is better than the film, and I think there's a reason for why they chose what they did in the film.
Yeah.
Probably because they can't. There's an edginess, a darkness to this, where you've got to sort of go and be digging up concrete to find the body.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I don't think Hitchcock's shy of, because he'll get to Psycho, and he's done other things.
Oh yeah, Psycho was before this too, wasn't it?
No, this is 1954. Psycho's 1960.
Oh God. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no. So I do love this ending, and the sort of
I love the ending. Well, and then this is the line like. And this still goes back to it. So he says he probably insured her for all it could get and then started to poison her slowly, trying not to leave a trace. I imagine, and remember, this is pure conjecture. She caught him at night, and the light was all in that night. The light was on all night. Caught in some way, or caught him in the act. He lost it. And it's like, again, It's pure conjecture, but
He's
this is that
making it
part
up.
where he's rolling, and
Yeah.
and that's the part when you're reading, you're like, dude, you even are saying out loud, I don't know what the fuck happened. But
Yeah.
you're just gonna say it anyway. It's crazy.
It
He's
is.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not just filling in the gaps, like he's literally making up like a crime.
None of that. You've never met these people. You
No.
say in the opening line, I've never met these people, but you've created this whole life for them.
There's a sequel to this called Guilty ! Where he turns up at the court and he's like, I saw it all. And they're like, no, you didn't. You
No,
didn't see any of it. What are you on about?
You're not an eyewitness. There is no eyewitness.
Yeah.
That is also, to me, and again, I don't think, and it's funny, we talk about these people. We talk about Poe, we talk about Doyle, you talk about these Dame Agatha Christie, these people who are crime writers, but they're considered top tier crime writers. And it's like we've decided in pop culture, there's only a handful. Lovecraft, he can write weird, totally weird shit. Like if aliens drop down and we're like, Lovecraft, they're like, this makes, although they're like, hey, we're in that book, they would have, that makes no fucking sense. But the world has decided Lovecraft is the weird guy we get to like, and like these other people you listed, we don't get. The world has decided Poe and Doyle and the Dame Christie, they're the ones we get. And so this guy, we don't care. We're throwing him off to the side. And it's crazy because this is really high quality writing. And the people who've continued on, like writing Robert Parker's books, you know, after he's no longer with us, and his family has continued on the series with other writers. Those other writers say it's fucking hard to write like him because he is so efficient with words. So it's like, I'm used to being able to take 40 words to explain 40 words, and Robert Parker took 15. And so I got to figure out, but because he writes so compactly, people call it trash. There's only room for so many. Well, we've already got Elmore Leonard. We don't need Robert Parker. You're like, well, but why isn't there room for both? So I feel like this goes back to, this ending is so good. It is, to me, it stands up with all those other names. Never heard of this guy. And I think it goes back to what you're saying. It's like pop culture decides
Yes.
who the winners are. Cornwell Woolrich isn't one of the winners because
just because. Exactly. I think I like the way you sort of like, there's like a list of like, you know, 5 to 10, and they go, well, we filled it. Yeah, but this guy's great. But the list is full.
We're done.
We're done.
Who are you going to take off the list? They're like, this isn't Mount Rushmore. The list, the world, we keep making new art. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, Paul Simon masked cornered folk singing. There's Paul Simon and there's Bob Dylan. After that, nobody else gets to be a folk singer. You're like, but
there's others.
But why?
Yeah.
Why is that? You know, like you wouldn't think to do that. But
no.
With other forms of art, but for this, especially for writing, you're like, especially when it's popular. If it's popular and people like it, if it's not, and I'm sorry, writing this is hard. This is super hard. Like literary fiction, the stuff that wins the Booker Prize and wins those books usually aren't very good. Like I am at this point where like all the books that win these awards, win the big national book awards, it's like, how uncomfortable can I make you? And then that means it must be good. You're like, that it can be complicated. This book, this short story is rife with character. It has, we've talked about it for 25 minutes. We could talk about it for another hour. It's really well done. It's well crafted. It's well paced, all of that. But because it doesn't say nipple, or because there's not something that just is weird about it for the sake of being weird. Yeah, I like what you're saying. There's a list. Oh, sorry, full up. We're all out of crime writers. Yeah. You're not invited.
Well, I think the thing is, like you say, that thing of one of the reasons of that list, and I think this comes back to, we'll get to the film in a second, because I think Hitchcock is sort of like, luckily, I think has benefited from this in a similar way. But it's that thing of being able to repackage something. Something becomes a product, not just the art. So as you've said, like with Agatha Christie, I think Agatha Christie is a fantastic example of, right, how many times can we publish the Poirot books or the Miss Marple books? Like, right, we're going to do it in this brand new, there's what's his face? You know, he's got
Kenneth Branagh.
Kenneth Branagh. He's got another one coming out.
I love his take on Poirot.
Oh, I do as well.
Those.
I love that
those
trilogy.
They're delightful. Yeah.
I think they're great. I do think they're great. But he's got another one coming out. Cool. Let's reprint a bunch of new,
of course. Yeah.
How many of her books could be sort of tangentially linked to sort of horror or Halloween? Cool. We're going to box them up and we're going to call them like Agatha Christie Dark, some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the one where the kid kills the whole family, that's pretty dark.
Yeah. But they'll, you know what I mean? But do you know what I mean? They'll package.
Yeah.
That's where they stay because they can be repackaged. And so there's a list where everyone goes, we love that. We love, Lovecraft's another example. Like
He's
right,
great. Yeah.
he's amazing. I love Lovecraft, but like, okay, I've got like a complete collection. I've got another complete collection. Like, I've got these different things, and you go, because he can be repackaged. Oh, I've also got like 2 art books based on Lovecraft. Cool. It can be repackaged. It happens because the name is recognized, so it stays at the top. And then you get these sort of like these one-offs and these smaller ones where you're just sort of like, oh, no one's heard of this guy, but they're actually amazing. So it must be bad.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like obscurity doesn't equal bad. No. I submit. Go hang out, watch a busker. You can't do that. Like, you are like, oh, it's just a busker. That's hard. What the busker's doing, and oftentimes they can take requests. You can just shout like "Purple Rain," and they're like, "Wow," and you're like, "What?" You know what I mean? Like a busker standing on the street corner probably knows 1,500 songs and has probably written 200 songs, but because you've never heard of her, you think she's just some random street musician, maybe, but in a different circumstance, she's Amy Mann. You know what I mean? And it's like just for circumstance. Well, and I love Amy Mann, but you know what I mean? Like, she's one bad day away from being just street busker, right?
Yes.
And so, right, if nobody's heard of you, you must be bad. And I that's why, again, I think I love that we're doing this series, because it's like, so far the short story writers are people nobody's really ever heard of.
I don't think we've done anyone particular. We're going to get
with
to
Candyman,
Clive Barker, and the next one coming up.
Yeah.
The next one coming up is a pretty biggie, but we'll get to that. But the point is, like, going back to Hitchcock. So let's transition to the film a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because I do think Hitchcock is fantastic. I love a lot of his films. But he's another one I think that people are like, oh, North by Northwest, or like, like Psycho or Rear Window. Oh, these are the epitome. These are the best thrillers in this. And you go, yeah, they are. They're good. But like, they may have been superseded. Not maybe superseded, but like they're up there with, other films. Then you sort of like. They're almost like you say, they're almost like protected because they get like a status.
No, that's a great point. I mean, North by Northwest is magnificent. I'm not here to. I mean, and here's
I'm
the
not
thing
bashing
why.
any of them. I'm really not.
But here's the thing why. This is also part of it, and this is, we talked about it last time with Carpenter, is they could do stuff that they can't do now. Like, you got to fly a plane at Cary Grant and film it. That's how, you know why it looks like that? Because why that guy, and you know why that fire in the thing looks so cool? Because John Carpenter lit that guy afire. That's why it looks so cool, because there's a person in there. That's not great. But it is true. Hitchcock has been given, and like we talked about his love for Daphne du Maurier, who is a but I know that Rebecca won all the awards. I don't think it's very good. I don't think the movie's very good. The book is exceptional. I don't think the movie, and the remake of it, the one that they did recently with Lily, Lily
James.
Lily James, but I can't even remember the guy from. He was in the Poirot movie too, the Lone Ranger guy.
Oh, the cannibal.
Army Hammer.
Yeah,
Army Hammer. Yeah. That was not any good either. And it's like, maybe that is an unfilmable. Maybe there's something too creepy about it. But again, like, it's fine. Rebecca's fine. But I don't see what's so great. And again, people throw hate mail my way, but it's like, this movie's way better than Rebecca. But again, it's like, he did something. You catch that lightning in a bottle, and therefore you get to continue to do it forever. Or if the world says, we were talking off air, if the world says Zack Snyder's movies are bad, then there's just gonna be people who are like, oh, it's a Zack Snyder movie. I'm like, fuck off. I mean, Sucker Punch, for all of its flaws, is visually amazing. Like, he just didn't understand. Like, he got in his own way there, but like, which he does.
Yeah,
he does that. He gets in his own way, but like, nobody's made a perfect film. But like,
no, maybe.
Well, maybe.
One day we'll get to that.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, and I think this is sort of something that Julian and I often sort of talk about on Stories Out of Time and Space.
Yeah.
I would rather watch a spectacular failure that swung for the fences than a boring film that everyone's like, oh, but it's technically perfect. And I'm like, yeah, but like, we were sort of lauding up Howard the Duck. I'm like, yeah, Howard the Duck. All right, technically, it's all got all kinds of issues, but you know what? It's amazing. Like
it knows what it's doing. It is having
yeah.
everybody's, and I think it's on the back of Tim Robbins and Leah Thompson's performances. Like
Yeah.
they were having all the fun in that ridiculous film. They're like, were there duck boobs in this movie? What are we doing? Like, is Leah Thompson, is she going to bang Howard at the end of that movie? Like, it's weird, and they know it's weird. And it's like arguably one of Lucas's, I mean, it is his biggest failure, right? But
it should be his legacy, is what I say.
Right? You know what I mean? He should be super, super proud of it. He's like, yep, this is Star Wars, American Graffiti, Howard the fucking Duck.
Yeah.
But you know, in all three of those cases, he did something that no one else was doing at the time.
Exactly. Swinging for the fences.
No, I think that's exactly right. And again, I'm not here to shit on Hitchcock, but you're right. I agree. He is definitely, he's Hitchcock.
Yeah. Well, he's technically brilliant, and I think that's the thing. One of the things I will say about this film, and I'm not saying he's boring. Like, there's this film I think is tense, and I think it works incredibly well. I think Jimmy Stewart is charismatic, yes, cranky. Grace Kelly is like
an angel. I believe
an angel, yeah. Like seriously,
she's 25 years old when they made this film. She died at 50. Remember, which is horrific and tragic. But she, like, you see what a superstar she was.
Yeah,
I mean, she
her charisma, her sex appeal and charisma is off the charts. But we're not going to talk about age differences between men and women in there. Well, let's put that aside because it's problematic, and
and Jimmy Stewart's character says something when the Lonely Hearts, Mrs. Lonely Hearts brings a guy home. She's like, "Hey, isn't he a little young?" We're like, "Dude,
yeah,
you were 21 when Grace Kelly was born. Let's calm down."
Yeah. Chill your beans, mate. Chill your beans. One of the things I love about this film is, and we're talking about, you say about sort of like North by Northwest and this idea of the practical of this. This film has probably one of my favorite sets of all time.
We talked about it. He built this.
Yeah.
It's they would never do something like this again. They would take a bunch of exterior shots from a bunch of different buildings and edited it together.
Yeah.
We watched the remaster too, our DVD. We got it from DVD from the library, and it is scrubbed up, and it even at the end credits like remastered by this person. I'm like, bravo.
Yeah. Oh, I watched it on the HD version on Prime.
Yeah.
Seriously, it looks fantastic. But that set as a physical set, it has sort of like space. It has a tactile nature to it. You know where everybody lives, and then all the characters have a place in it. And I just think it works so well. It sort of looks like a set to begin with, but I get so pulled into this that I'm like you said, Miss Torso, the ballerina that lives up in the
That's
top
how it
apartment.
starts with the typical Hitchcockian leer at a pretty blonde lady. Just so we know, she's going to take her top or put her top on.
Yes, and then she starts doing ballet with her legs up and all kinds of things. Jeez, but below her lives sort of like this older woman, and you got Miss Lonely Hearts. They give them all names. Then you've got the couple that sleep out on the balcony because it's so hot.
Yeah.
And they've got the little dog, and the musician who has the apartment that overlooks the whole thing. Like, and then you've got this other couple. Just it's all that it's brilliantly well done. Like, it's a living set. I think it's fantastic.
The music, I want to bring that up because of the way he designed the set. The music is the music. Like, there's no score except for the music when the musician's playing. And that's like, again, you can only get away with it. And I would submit, I wasn't there, that guy, I'm sure they laid it in over. I'm assuming they were actually playing that music. Like, that was
I assume so.
Part of the ambiance, like of it. It's like, and his has his windows pop out. So it even makes like the music lord over them a little bit more.
Yes.
It is. I know. I mean, I'm assuming it won something for set design because it is exceptional.
If it didn't, massive miss on that front.
Right.
But one of the things I'd forgotten about in this film, because they each have a life. Like, each of these people have a life, and each gets to do something. They pick them out, and some of it's like jokey, and some of it's a bit more serious, and some of it's actually very heartwarming. Forget the murder plot, right? Let's just talk. We'll get to that quickly, but I just want to cover off the jokes. We talked about Miss Torso, the ballerina. The fact she keeps getting, she's getting all these visitors and sort of these people trying to sort of like, producers, or just she has like, let's say, male admirers attending her thing. At the end of the film, basically Sergeant Bilko turns up, and that's her husband.
Yeah, and he's like a foot shorter than her.
Yeah, and
I thought it was brilliant. Yeah,
and that's amazing. And he's like, hi, honey, and she's like, oh, you're home, and it's just,
and she's like, oh, the army did you wonders, and she pats his stomach. So not only was he short, he was fat.
Yes, yeah, and I love it.
I love it.
So I love that.
And we talked about this with Carpenter, and Lee and I talked about this last night if we watched it. And again, just for the record, you can send all the hate mail at me, but she was like, he's a bit of a dick. But again, purposeful. But yes, 100%, he's a bit of a dick. But the one thing we talked about is, while there are a few places, again, I'm not going to tell Hitchcock where to cut things. This is just under 2 hours. It probably could have been like 1:45. There's a couple of moments, and they're all with Jimmy that we could cut. I wouldn't cut a fucking thing about that. Again, slow first act. We spend a half an hour getting to know all these characters. They don't have names. We only find out Thorwald's name because of nefarious purposes. The only names we know are the detective, him, Stella, and Lisa, and that's it. And he says Lisa weird. Lisa, it's his S, not a Z, James. And but we spend a half an hour getting to know the neighborhood, and you fucking care. You talk about not everybody having their own story. Like, you're genuinely stressed out. There's a moment towards the end with Mrs. Lonely Hearts that is like disconcerting, and I was like, people, fuck everything else.
Go to her. And Stella is sort of doing that, but then there's a distraction. But it's like, you care about her. You never hear her speak until the very end. But she mimes some things. There's just a lot of, miming. And again, Miss Lonely Hearts, Miss Lonely Hearts is, and I love the fact they've got like nicknames for them.
Yeah.
Which is great. But like, Miss Lonely Hearts, she's a spinster. Let's call it that. For it's like, And
again, I looked it up. She's 1 year younger than Jimmy Stewart. He was born in 1908, and she was born in 1909, and they're like 1 foot in the grave, old lady.
Yeah,
she was 45.
That's it. They've written her off. Like, it's ridiculous. But she has a date that goes wrong. I mean, it's a different culture, isn't it? It's the sort of 50s, but she has a date that sort of like doesn't quite go well, and so the guy storms out, and then all of a sudden they're just watching Thornwall, sort of like what's going on, and you say Stella sort of notices, says, well, she's got these tranquilizer pills, and he's like, what, were you sure? He's like, I've given enough of those to sort of like put the whole of New York to sleep for the winter, and then to get distraction. But you're like, no, she's about to commit suicide. Like, do something.
Stop what you're doing. This is more important. That lady's already dead. Hurry. But Grace Kelly was in peril.
Yes, there is that.
That was it.
Swings around. Swings around.
Right,
but she's saved because she hears the music.
Correct.
And I love that there's a connection there. So the musician who plays his music, and then at the end of it, they make a connection, and
then you hear them talk. And the cool thing about the musician is, again, the story that builds. At the beginning, it's just him alone and his playing, and he's mad and he's throwing stuff down, and you can't quite get it right. And it keeps getting better. And then there's 2 people listening to him. And then the next time you see him, there's like 5 people. And then there's a whole party, and you're like, oh shit, he's celebrating. And it's never said that that's what happened. And then it comes, and then at the end, they're playing the record. I mean, it's like you see him like working it out, and there's musicians playing with him, but it's all just happening there. And you care. And it's all from that slow first act, and you couldn't, and this is why Hitchcock is Hitchcock. Can't get away with that. There's only a handful of directors who could say, and I think Scorsese can get away with it, but I think, fuck you, dude, your movie doesn't need to be 3 hours. I'm not going to watch it. But
4. There's a hand. I think it's probably it doesn't even 4 hours. It doesn't.
I'm not going to watch it. I don't give a shit. Again, this movie was 2 hours long. I cared about everybody, but there's only a handful, I think, of directors left who can take their time like this. And this was how everything was just done. And we talked about Carpenter did it, and They Live. It's a 30-minute first act when nothing happens. But if you're not going to have that, then you don't care about the people in the camp. You don't care that Roddy wants to save the world.
Yeah.
In this, if you don't spend that 30 minutes, then none of it matters.
Yes.
And it's so well done. And it's like, I don't know. I'm so impressed.
No, it's not. The thing I'm most impressed about is not only that I say this is the solid first act, but it follows through.
Mm,
Because the other thing is, like,
yes.
so many directors would have that first act and everyone would laud the first act, but then they'd focus on the main plot and everything else would just fall away.
Oh, right. Okay.
But through this, throughout the film, the point of this film is, you know, yes, you're following let me put it this way, you're following Jeff's story. That's what you're following because it's the murder mystery. It's the most important one. But as you say, there's a musical drama going on in another apartment that you could be following.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And her and Miss Torso is
there's a romantic
as we
comedy.
learn at the end.
There's a romantic
she's like
comedy
fending
going on.
off all these men who are, you know, and she's married.
Yeah.
So you have no idea. Yeah.
That's it. The romantic comedy of a ballerina trying to sort of, like, you know, keep her honor, like, going on in another
And
apartment.
there's an exotic romp or erotic romp with the newlyweds.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the newlyweds. So there's a romance film about the newlyweds or whatever. Like, you know, there's like 4 of the movies going on.
There are, and you buy them, and they matter.
Exactly. And so I just find this whole thing sort of like, you know, so well structured that it all matters. But you're just following this one interaction. It's the most important, granted, like, you know, it's about murder. But I just love that. I just wanted to highlight how great the set is and how well it's utilized. And I just think, I don't think any modern director would follow through in the same way that I think that Hitchcock does.
And would a modern director put a dog in a basket 30 feet up and roll it down in a wheelie? that happened.
Dog, little CG dog. Yeah. I'm surprised this is practical. I'm surprised he didn't actually kill a dog as well because the dog gets killed. And
the dog dies.
They were like, you know, Hitchcock's like, well, I like authenticity. Snap, you know.
Yeah, I assume that didn't happen. This is not To Kill a Mockingbird. Gregory Peck did not. I still am convinced Gregory Peck kills that dog.
Yeah,
like, have you
quite possibly?
100%. I feel like Gregory Peck killed that dog. I don't believe anybody. You don't see anybody kill the dog, but they keep putting a dog in a basket, and that is again the couple that's sleeping out on and they genuinely like each other and they seem happy and whatever, and you get to fill in their life. Like maybe they don't have any kids and that's why they have the puppy, but they love each other. They sleep next to each other outside on the balcony. Like, it's hot. Instead of like, I'm going to sleep outside, they go out there together because they're hot.
At first you think it's just the husband, don't you? Like,
I know. And then she sits up
and you're like, like, oh, they're together. Like, he's not been kicked out. So yes, brilliant. But it does sort of tangle into the plot as well. Because obviously at the heart of this is Lars, Thorwald. Yeah, Christ. Raymond Burr.
Sweaty Raymond. And I know it's hot. And at the beginning, it starts with Jimmy Stewart's sweaty head, but then we leave. That's the one thing he doesn't follow through, except for Raymond Burr. And I believe, like, they're like, let's just say it's really hot, so the windows have to be open. That's the thing. But also, like, let's cast Raymond Burr because no matter what the temperature is, he's going to be sweating.
Yeah. It looks hot. He makes it look hot.
It makes you feel warm all the time.
Yeah, the set's
he doesn't even have. It's not bearded Raymond Burr. This is young Raymond Burr, and he's still just heat radiates off that guy.
Yes. Yes, he looks uncomfortable in the clothing he's in. Let's be fair. Like, he really looks uncomfortable. Really does. Yeah. If anyone needed some linen trousers, it's Raymond Burr in the 50s. That's what he needed.
Oh my god.
But like I say, the character he plays, there is a sort of like a manic nervousness that comes across like throughout, and I love the way he plays it. Like, because he's a big guy, like you say, but he never comes across evil. Is how I would say. Like, he never comes across, like, you know, the things he does seem to be out of necessity. Like, whatever's happened, whatever reason he killed his wife, like, you know, whether kind of passion or premeditated or whatever. Like, everything else seems out of desperation after that.
Yeah.
And he seems like a desperate man. Like, you know, when sort of like they send him the note, and when he catches Grace Kelly in his apartment, the confrontation is him panicked.
Yeah.
Rather than him being like, oh, you're in my house, you know, I'm angry. It's like, oh shit, somebody legit knows something's up. Yeah.
And that honestly is again, because Raymond Burr is an excellent actor and Grace Kelly is as well. And I feel like that is really tense. That's a really tense scene. And it's juxtaposed to the scene just before with Miss Lonely Heart's gropey date.
Yes.
She thought they were coming home for a nice nightcap and maybe little kissy on the couch, and he thought they were coming home to fool around and have sex, and she was not ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
So she kicks him out, but that was a really tense scene, and she's stressed out to the point where she's about to kill herself, and that's all happening, and then this happens next, and so you just see those two scenes, and like the reason that you see, again, good filmmaking. Here's this lech who comes in and is taking advantage of this old spinster and whatever, Jesus Christ. But then up here you see this guy, and she smacks him and he sends him away, and he storms off, whatever. And then you see this other scene here where you're right, he's not being aggressive, he's being defensive. Lars feels attacked by Lisa being there, and his space has been invaded, and he's in full-on panic mode. And again, so again, great setup. And if we did spend time down here with them, like you said, if they had forgotten about these other characters and then suddenly cut back to them for no reason, you're like, who is that again? But this is like, it's like, and now, but because we stayed with it, we're set up. We've just been conditioned to think one thing is going to happen. Yeah. And then something different happens. And so it plays with our expectations, and it's
brilliantly well done. The other one on that,
it is, and because of the way he shoots it, whether it's done in a take or not, it can move up, because like you said, that set is a character.
Yeah. Well, I think you say about that the use that you can do panning shots. He does all kinds of, you can pan up the buildings, pan around, and I have a memory that I'll get to in a bit, but
no, I want to hear that. Yeah,
but the one we talked about in the novel, in the story, how there's the scene of the chain smoking, and how I sort of like, I was said about how it makes you feel, but that again is done incredibly well, in so creepily done in the film, when it's just sort of like the blinds down and then two windows are open, but they're black, like it's just black in there. There's no light whatsoever, like, and Jimmy Stewart sort of sat there at his window. It's night, and it's sort of like his windows are open, and he's looking for him. He's like, what's going on? And all of a sudden you just see that little red glow at the end of a cigarette. It's
so good.
It's so good.
And it's framed perfectly in the center of the window, in the center of the camera, and you're just like, and that's when he's staring.
But back. It's not like it's superimposed. You know there is someone sat away from that window, and it's so like, it's so well done, because he's like, is he there? Is he gone? And you just see that light, that cigarette, and you're just like, just that single little bit of light, and it's just creepy as hell. But that's when that was in my head when, having read the story, I'm going like, he's up because he's in a state of panic, he's anxious, he's really, if the body's still there, like he can't go anywhere in his apartment, like he's still racked with nerves and guilt about this whole thing, and it starts to put this whole film in a different light to me. Yes, it's murder, but still, like, this feels more like a desperate man that's had a bit of he's fucked up and he's a desperate man, rather than this is a genius murderer or a serial killer. Like, this isn't
right. He's not Moriarty. Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, it's not. You're not hunting you are trying to catch a thief or catch a murderer, but you're not. Right. It's not a serial killer. He's not going to do this again because he doesn't kill. He's got enough time. Yeah. He's big. Raymond Burr is, again, excellent casting, and Grace Kelly is not an imposing figure in any way, shape, or form. And so, like, Raymond, if he were just a serial killer, he was just out for murder, as soon as he caught her, he could have just snapped her neck.
Yeah. And then claim self-defense, or like,
right. She broke into my house.
Yeah.
Right. Well, she was in his. He could do it. In Florida, where I live, you could just shoot the person and say, self-defense, you're in my house. People shoot each other. We have a weird fucking bullshit stand your ground law. Whereas if you feel threatened, you can just shoot somebody.
Yeah.
So he could have said but in this case, she was literally in his apartment.
Yeah.
Right. And in the story, Lars has a gun. There's no gun in this, which again, and I think that was smart, because in that moment, he would have shot her. And so you're not going to kill Grace Kelly. people.
remove the guns out of this because I think it makes it so much more tense. But that's
It
the point.
so does. Yeah, you're right.
But that's my point. Like this whole thing is, it's not about like a seasoned killer. This isn't a brutal, vicious man. This is someone that's fucked up, and he's sort of like panicking about the whole thing about what do we do about it. They have the whole thing again. We have the detective who doesn't believe him, goes in and never look around and that sort of thing. But then we get to the end. Let's just get to the end of this. We're gonna
And don't forget your memory. You got to tell us that too. Is that come now or does that come after this? I don't want to forget it.
No, I will do it now because I want it links to the set. So the first time I watched this film, I was 11. Okay. And I know that because I watched it when I was in Florida.
Oh.
And we've gone with my family for Halloween Horror Nights. So it was in October. And we had my dad was like, you got to watch this film. All right. And so we watched it when we were in we were like I can't remember, a hotel. Where the hell we were, but I watched it somehow. And when you go to Universal Studios back then, so this was like for me, this was like 30 years ago. Christ. What's 30?
You better watch out, Miss Lonely Hearts.
Yeah,
3
decades, man. Anyway, they had one of the things they had was because they obviously had the Psycho House and they have they had Earthquake and all that stuff. But one of the things they had was Rear Window, and you'd go into an experience where you would stand at a fake like a window set and you would look out over this setup, this set, like a model of this set, and each window had video. Like each of the windows was like a little screen, or most of them were, and they'd have things playing. And so you would stand and you would watch this, and it would have like Miss Torso and whatever, and then all of a sudden you'd hear a scream or something, and then you'd have to look around for it and that sort of thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was just part of a thing. All I have is this memory of seeing that. So, to listeners, if you saw this and you have experienced it, I'm sure it's Universal Studios because that's where the Psycho House was, isn't it? That's where they had the.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
It was there. I have this really solid memory of
amazing.
Rear Window,
that is so cool.
And then we went to Universal Studios like days later, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. So it was very, very cool, and I sort of remember that fondly.
That is such a good, and again, those are things to me. That is a really, and I hate amusement parks. I mean, I live an hour and a half, 2 hours away from there. I could go anytime, and Florida residents gets discount, but like that's a lot of people, and it's my own personal hell going to Orlando. But that is such a cool. That's way cooler than like whatever you're like. Let's turn it into like Brian Regan does this joke about Batman the ride. Well, it's like there's no. He's like that was just like the movie, except there were no characters and plot structure or anything.
It's a roller coaster with
exactly. Yeah, where it's just like we're calling it Penguins, whatever, because you're hanging upside, or Batman's whatever, because you're hanging upside down. That's dumb. Just call it whatever. You don't need to do the branding, but it's just extra branding. But like that is cool. Like that is a cool thing to do, to be like, this is what this is like, and this is what. That's tension. And if you're there at Universal Studios, it shouldn't be. I mean, yes, there's rides or whatever, but it should be about that. It should be almost like
that was
museum type thing.
No, it was. I think, and I haven't been to Universal since the early 2000s, but that 90s Universal and sort of part of design, but like the Jaws ride, Confrontation, where like you went on something, you were on a cable car and you were chased by, you saw Kong going throughout the city.
Nice.
Earthquake, where you were on a tube car and the water comes down. Like it's an experience. Like it wasn't a ride. You were experiencing the movies. That's what I remember from like Universal Studios.
And then there's Bullet, where they give you a car and let you kill a bunch of people while driving really fast.
That'd be amazing.
There's just a whole street where they just let you drive around like a maniac.
GTA, the game, the ride.
The French Connection, the ride. No.
Anyway, going back to let's get to the end of the film. But that was
the end of the film.
So
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That is just super cool. I'm envious that you got to experience that, and that your dad was like setting you up for it. Again, he was like knowing you were going to do that. So he's like, you need to experience it fully. You need to be creeped the fuck out by this, so you can go there. And that's so cool.
Yeah,
amazing.
So the end of this film, it plays different. There is no drop floor.
Nope.
it sort of becomes more of a confrontation. So that you've had Grace Kelly as Lisa has been caught. There's the police have been involved again, and again he's sort of been told to back off a little bit, and go to continue. I'm trying to remember it now in my head. I'm trying to put the events in order. But he basically after everything, Raymond Burr's Lars sees
because he's left his lights on.
Yes,
Yeah,
he sees Jeffries in the windows and stuff, and starts to he himself figures it out. In response, and so he goes after him, and so
slowly.
Yes,
Very Michael Myers of him.
Yeah, very purposefully, and that's what I love about this, where it's sort of like it's not rage, as in like he's not racing across the thing to sort of stop him. It's sort of like he knows, because I think he's still in that anxious state, still panicking, but it's almost like frustration. Like, you tried to blackmail me, or like you've made
because
this.
He doesn't know. It's reciprocal. Like, he doesn't know what we know, just like we don't know. Like, Jeffries really doesn't know what the fuck's going on over there. We never find out why he kills his wife, which I think is genius. But like, he's like, why the fuck are you fucking with me? Mind your own goddamn business.
Yeah.
You fucking people. So he's like, because up to that point, he definitely because the fake out is that it was blackmail. He blackmails him to get him out of the apartment.
Yes.
So Stella and Lisa can go over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He tells him to go meet him somewhere, and that'll give them half an hour or so to search the apartment. But this is where, and I'm not going to ding much, or if anything, of this film, but I love it. There's the sets in this film are great, but the set of Jeffrey's apartment, and that you spot it early on, is the door to the door to his apartment is raised up and is in shadow. So that when you first meet Lisa, Grace Kelly's character, she enters the apartment and she's sort of like in shadow, and then she steps out and she's this radiant beauty, and you're just like, oh shit, like how the hell have you hooked her? Like, you cranky old git. But when Lars comes in, he's just this sort of like silhouette of an imposing figure. But it acts both ways. And this is why I think, again, this is so clever. Because it allows you to have this like domineering silhouette of a figure that, we know is a killer, or we're still assuming is this killer. But also there's a practical reason for it in the film. Because he is in the dark, his eyes are obviously used to the dark, and then Jeffrey's, Jimmy Stewart's character, Jeff, uses a flashbulb on him that blinds him. Now, this is where I'm going to ding it slightly. Fool me once.
Right. He does it 4 times in a row.
He does it 4 and just keeps coming. And what's even better is he sees that like Jeffrey's is covering his eyes.
Yeah.
And so he's like, maybe I should do that. Like, there's no attempt. He just keeps walking, Michael Myers style, into the flashbulbs, which is kind of hilarious by the 4th one.
I love the setup because early on we see he's in his wheelchair. His nurse Stella's like, quit sleeping in the chair. Grace is lounged down on his bed all the time. So it's a small apartment. It's just like it's like a studio, right? He can't go many places. The kitchen is off to the side. There's a bathroom here. And again, it's a step down. So again, it's like, there's the step down. There's the dropped floor. Like, so you built it, but it's just in the wrong apartment. But again, it's fine. So, but it is that because he's in a wheelchair. And there's the reason that it's good with his deliberateness is it builds up the tension as Jeffries is trying to figure out what the fuck he can do. And he's like, can I get up? Can I move? Can I not? Whatever. And they do it very cleverly. The break in his leg goes all the way up to his waist, and you see it. And again, good writing earlier. You see him; he has to take his shirt off, and you see that his leg,
the cast has gone around his waist,
around his midsection to hold the weight of that. Because if it were just on his leg, he'd be tipped over to one side. So he can move his left leg, but his right leg has this thing around it, and it's just for balance. But because of that, it doesn't allow him to. He can't get up. He can't get out of the apartment in time, and so. It's just all really well crafted, and again, set design, everything. So I like that he's kind of stuck, and he's trying to figure out where can I go, and there's nowhere to go. I mean, there's a bathroom that he can't even get. I mean, we never see him pee once, so I assume he's just wearing a diaper. I don't know. I'm not
Just really, really stinky pajamas at this point.
But yeah, Grace Kelly just is into him. She sits on his lap all
She
the time.
loves pissy old men. That's what it is.
That's right. Grace Kelly, pissy old man. That's her game. That is why Hitchcock wanted her in, because he's like, I hear you like pissy old men.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, it is. I agree. I think the set is apart. Back to your beginning about the building design, but then Jeffrey's apartment is the last thing, because you just get, again, good storytelling, good slow first act. You just get you become acclimated to the space, and then you realize, oh fuck, he's trapped in there.
Yeah,
it's a cell that he's in. He's in a pit.
Yeah.
But because everybody who comes through the door is the police officer, is Stella, or is Grace Kelly, you're like, well, that door is full of good. And then you're like, oh, fuck, no, it is. And they never talk about the fact that the stairs are there, but they rightfully so show enough people coming in and out that it's
they're always elevated. They're always elevated. Like, he can't take that door.
Yeah.
Which, like you say,
really good.
handicap access, not great in the 50s.
No, not at all. Yes, that building could not exist today.
Yeah.
Although in New York, it probably, I mean,
oh, sure, it still does.
People in New York will like rent a closet to live in.
Yes.
And that's not even a joke.
No. Yeah, I've seen some of the apartments online and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, the flashbulbs, they have a confrontation. And, Jeffrey starts sort of like shouting and screaming. And luckily, it sort of gets attention. But Raymond Burr basically pushes him out of the window. He Hans Gruber's his way down. And we find out there's a punchline to that, which we get to. But he falls down. But the police have already arrived and are racing across. And they've got Grace Kelly with them and all that sort of thing. So she's been sort of released and because she's been taken in.
Yeah.
But this is where they take in Raymond Burr's character. They take Lars in. But you say, you're never entirely sure. I don't know. I was like, he's not. Has he been arrested for this? You never find out if there's an actual murder.
You never know. You never ever know. Well, the argument that they make, the supposition is that he buried the body in the flowers, or one of the parts, that he cut her up.
Yes.
The dog found that, and that's why he killed the dog.
Part of her, yeah.
Yeah, and then he had to dig it up and move her again. And there's this, like, because he keeps coming in and out with his sample case because he sells costume jewelry, and so Jeffrey is convinced that he's taking the body parts out. But then they do say something. He's going to take us on a tour of the East River. That's the line that Doyle says at the end. And so you're like, it's the East River.
He's cut up and put her in the river, like, yeah.
Right. Well, guess what? You can take her on a tour of that, but nothing's going to be there because it's a river. It flows. It didn't just sink. That's not how rivers work. That's why.
If his aim was really bad, it's all just sat on the slight beach.
He's just sitting there. He's like, "Yep, here's just her arm. I put it.
I left an arm on the beach on this bench, and there's a head on the wall."
Right. She's just around. Yeah, and that's the argument that they are sort of making, is that he's admitted to doing everything. He's admitted to it, and he's going to take us on a tour of the East River, but we never see it. It's never officially confirmed. And then, he falls and he lands on the police. Yeah. And then we cut to now both of his legs are broken.
Yeah.
And Grace Kelly is lounging about in his bed because they have this fight, this whole thing. She wants to marry his old man, pissy ass. And he's like, you're too perfect. Like, he and Stella even have the argument. It's like, she's too perfect. And you're like, yep.
Yeah. No disagreements.
She's got a job, right? She's a model. We see that she's on the cover of Life magazine or whatever, as she should be.
And he phoned that. I get the feeling
he took that photo.
That's where he met her.
That's right. Because he's got the negative of her, and she wants him to go back and like quit being a war reporter and then come back and do the work that he did. That's how they met. And he's like, I'm not going to do that because she runs a magazine. Like, she's a mogul, right? She's rich. She's a person of means who does something that makes money. And she's like, I guess the only way I'm going to get to see you is if I buy the magazine that you work for. And she wants him to quit and come work for her and her magazine. Yeah. And he doesn't want to make less or work for his wife or whatever. And he's like, what are you going to do? You're going to run around. I'm going to do my Jimmy Stewart. You're going to run around in those heels. Yeah. And he's like, doing this whole shit. And then she does. Then the whole movie is her proving him wrong.
Yes.
And it's like, so again, that whole weird Hitchcockian sexism that at the end, like, she at the end, he's knocked out. He's got both of his, and she's reading like a book about traveling to one of the places like Nepal or something, one of the places he says they're going to go. And then she puts it down and picks up Bazaar and just reads the magazine that she, at the end. And that's how it ends. So,
yeah.
But there's this whole thing about like, she's going to stay with him and live in his shitty apartment because he doesn't want to go live in her super nice apartment and take pictures of.
Yeah. Let's be clear. That relationship's not lasting that long.
No,
like they're
not.
They are not together. Yeah, that's
got daddy issues. I don't know.
There's something wrong there, but it's not lasting. That relationship is doomed, and it's evident. Like he's right. She's too good for him, and the film proves it repeatedly.
It does.
Because, like you say, not only is she's smart, she's beautiful, she's smart, she's brave. She's supportive. Like she's just like, she's graceful.
Lobster dinner.
Yeah,
to his house.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She makes him. Listen, by the way, one of the things that's super distracting, and I have had brandy in my life, but I'm glad I don't drink it out of a snifter because it is like a 5-minute scene of them all just shaking their brandy sifters, and at some point Lee goes, "Jesus Christ, drink it." And then he spills it on himself because he's like, I don't know how to sniff. You're like, well, you definitely know how to do whatever this is. And again, I
did think that was funny when they're all sort of like circling it around. I thought that was like, well, that was a directing choice. That's clearly a choice. That was
them, and they're like, can we stop now? And he's like, keep doing it.
I'm getting repetitive strain injury.
It was so weird. But no, she is awesome, and this is the one thing that is. I agree. I'm with you. That relationship is doomed to fail. So if I want to put my feminist lens on it, and again, because I do not think Hitchcock is a feminist in any way, shape, or form. But everything that you just said is true. She's a total badass. And the hero of the movie is Lisa with Stella. Yeah. They're the hero. And that Jimmy Stewart is not the hero of his own movie because he is totally impotent, right? She keeps climbing on his lap and wants to bang him. She wants to sleep over in her sexy lingerie, and he's like, I'm going to sleep in this chair. You're like, and she even shows it to him. She's like, a preview of what you're about to see. And he's like, I guess we should ask the landlord if it's okay if you stay over. Yeah. I'm like, dude, the fuck? And so there's like this, he's literally like broken. He's a broken man. He can't do anything. He has to get saved at the end. He has to call for help. So there's this very much flip, he's the damsel in distress, and the damsel literally in a dress, an $1,100 dress and heels, is running around climbing up a fire escape. So you could argue it's a very feminist, pro-women message.
It's accidentally like a pro-feminist film in 1954.
Right.
Yeah. You're right though. I think it's there. And again, like even Stella, like the nurse, is proactive and stuff like So yeah, I think that's sort of a way to see it. You want to talk about him about Jeffries. You talk about obviously the negative and the Life magazine or Time magazine that's there of Lisa. I love the fact that you find out about like the photography that's happened, but also how he broke his leg. No one tells you how he broke his leg, but one of the photos is a car crashing and a tire flying towards it, like in a picture, and you're like that's clearly like what happened.
And the smashed up cameras there. Yeah, because no, somebody does say in passing later, I never told you to go onto that racetrack.
Oh yes, they do.
Yeah. But it's like halfway through the movie till you find out. You just kind of piece it together that you're an idiot.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. But I love that's how it starts. Like it pans on broken camera, and then basically like a black and white photo of a car crashing and a tire flying
coming at him. Yeah. I know, I love it, and it's again that's really good. That's a slow first act. You can't in a movie now. You need exposition man to come in and do it. Like everybody's in a fucking hurry to still make a 3.5-hour movie of bullshit, but you still need Captain Exposition to come in and say everything. Where this is like, hey. Pay attention. And
yes,
you talked about one of my favorite. I think the moment of the film is the hot butt of the cigar or cigarette on the other across the way. You can't make this movie today because people aren't paying attention. And if they are watching, they're not watching on a screen that's big enough to see it. Like we watched it like I've got a pretty decent sized computer screen that I'm talking to you on. We've got a decent sized TV. We're not like super monster, but this is a movie that was Hitchcock made for a big fucking
This
screen.
is a cinema film.
That red dot was in the middle of a big, huge black screen. It was
Yeah.
like haunting you.
Yeah.
This movie, people who are watching, like, don't watch this movie on your phone.
No.
You're not going to get it. It's not going
This
to work.
needs.
Yeah. So
this
I feel
film
like
benefits from HD and it benefits from a big screen.
both. And it benefits from the time, the different audience intention. Like a slow movie, like they still make slow movies. They still, like, my favorite trilogy is the Before trilogy. Nothing happens. It's two people walking around and talking.
Yeah.
I love those movies. Like, seriously, favorite trilogy. Like, I should say Star Wars because, like, that's my earliest memory. But honestly, my favorite trilogy is the Before trilogy, where nothing happens. Two people hate each other and then love each other and then hate each other. That's the movie, and the performances are exceptional. You could watch that on a small screen because just people walking around talking. But the pacing of those movies is slow and deliberate, and you fall in love with Jesse and Celine, and you're with them. You're with these characters.
That's what I was gonna say. This one of the things I'm sort of learning, or sort of one of the things that Julian and I are doing is the Kurosawa effect. We're going through.
I can't wait to hear those.
We're going through all of like Akira Kurosawa's filmography, like in the early stuff. Like, you know, we just did. What did we do the other day? We did Drunken Angel, which is 1948. Am I right? 1948, yeah. And there's, like, you know, there's bits and pieces in that, but like, there's a pacing to these films. And, you know, culturally, obviously, like, you know, these are Japanese films, but there's a pacing to these films from the 40s. And you just sort of like, I'm digging them. Like, we were both sort of really into them. It's a new experience to me. But you're saying about this thing about exposition. And I noticed this with a couple of these sort of Kurosawa films, where there's stuff where you just go, oh, I've missed something. And you like, yeah, I have, because I'm not paying attention. Like, these aren't films you can sort of watch while you're doing the ironing or anything like that. You know, you've got to watch these films. And I feel like there is something about that. Like, this was an experience. This was a movie experience. You went to the movies to see the film. Because, you know, like, using, for example, at the start of this, you know, we just talked about, you see the photo, and you see the camera, and like, there's a drop line later on. You may get that in some films where they'll have like really badly done sort of like youthing people to sort of make them look like photography. But guaranteed there'll be also directors that'll have like the friend come in or Stella come in and go like, I can't believe you had the photo done of you of the tire that broke your leg.
That's it. They would. Oh my God, you're totally right. Stella would say it. Stella would be like, that picture of you getting hit by the car. It's like, no, you just saw it.
Yeah, I know. I got that.
Right.
You haven't got to tell me. And, you know, you'd have someone else going like, you'd have the burning butt in the cigarette thing. And then you'd have someone sort of like, you'd have Lisa again or Stella, or even, well, it'd be one of those, lean in and be like, he's in there. And you'd be like, we know. You don't need to tell us.
We're watching your movie. And that is one of the things that frustrates me so much. And I kind of make fun of it in my book series, where it's like, I don't get halfway through the book and then remind you what was said earlier. Like, I might remind you, I might like say like, something, you know, but I won't like retell the whole first, like in chapter 30, I'm not going to retell chapter 1. Yeah. Like, I trust that you read the book. And if I did a bad job and you don't remember, like, there's Ken Follett is a British writer, and he fucking does that to beat the band. He repeats himself. And I know he writes these like 1,000-page tomes, but here's the thing, Ken. Nobody's picking up your 1,000-page book if they don't think they can handle it. Nobody's like, I'm going to do some light reading. Oh, the Century series is a 3,000-page trilogy. I've never read a book before. I'm going to pick that up. No, you don't need to quit. I'm reading your book. Trust your audience. And
can you imagine if Tolkien was doing that? Like, you know,
oh my God,
we're now at Helm's Deep, but I just want to tell you about what happened once again when we left the Shire. And you'd be like, no, I don't need that. Like, you know,
I don't need that at all. That Tolkien is a great shout out. He trusts his readers. There's no, and I know people hate Tom Bombadil, and I love Tom Bombadil, but, you know, like, even in Tom Bombadil, you're like, Tom Bombadil. You have to, when you're done reading, or you're like, is Tom Bombadil God of Middle Earth? Is that like, when you're done, you're like, holy shit, Tom Bombadil is the creator. And you didn't know because he let you figure it out. There's the breadcrumbs are there. There's enough lines. So not like, remember in the first book when we walked and hang out with Tom and he saved us from the tree and remember all that?
Yeah.
No. Yes, I do remember. You don't need to tell me again. So yeah, I do. You're right. Somebody wouldn't have said, I think he's in there. Yeah, no shit. He's in there.
We get
oh my
it.
God. That's
yeah.
so well said.
and that's what that's it. There's this sort of like there's a trust of viewers that, you know, well, they don't have the attention, or they're not paying attention enough because they're on their phones or they're doing something else, so they're not going to catch it. So we've got to tell them to catch this thing. And that's not all directors. Again, we sort of mentioned Scorsese. I think, you know, Spielberg. I think, you know, he still does these things. I think there's a couple of others, but like generally, I think modern directors really do sort of go like, or even writers, like hammer it home. Just keep reminding or feeding the information.
Do you think it's the writers and directors, or the studios saying they're people that are too dumb to get it?
I think it started as the studios.
Okay.
So I think you see this in sort of like with the birth of the big films in the 80s and 90s, where they've just got to, you know, you've got to keep sort of hammering stuff, you know, hammer the point. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's become the norm. It started as a studio thing, and now it's just become the norm. Oh, that's how you write a script. And you're going like, no, it's not.
So, it doesn't, and you can't, and again, I'm not knocking that. I'm not, there are, and this is the thing, movies, slow burner, movies like this can still exist, but they're going to be direct to streaming. They're going to be made for a nickel. And, you know, and again, nobody's going to see them. So then therefore people are going to say they're not any good. But it's funny when you think of these big classic movies, the movies we're discussing here, and you know, and again, This Island Earth, when we end, is a stinker, but I also love it for being that.
Yeah.
But it's nighttime. I don't think so. I can't wait for us to get to that movie because it's so stupid. But there's still, even that movie just kind of like that line is in there because they're like, we're clearly filming at day, so we have to say it's nighttime out loud, like because of the budget constraints. And like Ed Wood, and his heart was so big and his movies are so bad, but like he even tried to let you like tell a story with pictures. That's what film is. And I understand it's a visual medium, and I know people do it for comfort. They're like, this is my favorite. Like I could put on Heathers and move around because I could just get up and act out Heathers.
Oh, 100%. I've got the films. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So but even Heathers rewards you for paying attention. Like there are a handful, one of our favorite films, Hudson Hawk, it rewards you for paying attention. Shit's happening in the background. Last Crusade, when she's like, what is that? And he's like, Ark of the Covenant. She says, are you sure? He says, pretty sure.
Yeah.
If that movie were made now, they'd have to be like, well, stop and remind you what happened in the previous movie. No, if you're watching Last Crusade,
insert Raiders flashback here.
Right, we don't need that. What were we just watching? We're watching Lost for the first time. I've never seen Lost. We don't know how it ends. And they do those flashback scenes in Lost, which is fine, which we're here for. But then in one of the seasons, which is weird because it's JJ and Lindelof, so they don't do this. So again, this is like, is that the studio? Like they literally, it wasn't like, it was a previous on Lost thing. It should have been, but it was like in the show. We're like, wait, you're playing something from season 1 in the middle of the show, not at the beginning. It's like, if you're in season 4 of Lost, you're in. You don't need us. We don't need that. So yeah, that's a, I think you're right. I think it started as the studio. Now it's just what people think, but there are still, these movies still get made. I mean, I don't know that a movie like this, I mean, just because in Disturbia, the modern version, he definitely did it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, and David Morse's 100% guy, but it's not this. It's
never in dispute. It's never really in dispute in that film.
Right.
No, I'm not. I'm just looking. I'm just thinking. I'm looking up and thinking about other films. I say, like, you know, I think there was a time when you would have that. You know, you bought into things. You know, and there's sort of like a film I often think about for this, which is a really odd side, just and we'll bring around to because it's not. It's Tim Burton's, but it's Edward Scissorhands.
I love Edward Scissorhands.
And Edward Scissorhands, tragic, heartbreaking. I love that film and sort of like, you know, but it's one of those films where
the
like
best remake of Pinocchio ever.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, but like logistically, that film like doesn't work. Like, you know, Scissorhands. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. Like, and there's so much in that film that that is just weird and stuff. But it's one of those films where, like, you know, Edward, played by Johnny Depp, doesn't talk. You know, you got these bits like he exists in this like weird Burton-esque world, and there's all this going on. But it's one of those films where like it's not going to spoon feed you anything. It's a fairy tale, and you're either in it or you're not. and it
That's a
does not
great
care,
point.
and it does not care if you are. Like, it's going, I'm going to tell this story. Well, you'll get a little bit of a flashback at the beginning with the wonderful Vincent Price.
Oh, is that
And
his
like,
last role?
yes, it is.
Uh,
And so you get this like little bit at the beginning, but that's it. Like, there's this thing of like, he just tries to give him hands, but there's no sort of like, this is how I made you. This is why I made you. This is your purpose. Like, he's not looking for his destiny. Like, this isn't like a destiny fulfilling film. This isn't that. Like, the film's just like, oh, I'm just gonna tell this story, and it's weird, and it's a fairy tale, and that's all there is to it. And that's what I feel like now. You everything has to have a purpose. Well, the villain has to have we have to understand the villain's motivation and why he's doing this and what he's doing it for, and it has to be almost justified, because he can't be a straightforward bad guy. Like, there's all these things you have to do now, and it's like, yeah, but you've almost taken away the need to watch do you know what I mean? Like, I can just sit back and you've made we were talking about it, sort of like we were talking before, I think, about pop culture. We were talking about Agatha Christie. This is what we're talking about. It's the same thing with these films where you go, and I enjoy the Kenneth Branagh Poirot films.
I do too.
But I think they're very good. I think that, I think they get a bit of stick. But I would say they are slightly tinged by the need, but they keep the mystery, and I think they all play out well, but they're very glossy, and they all start with, they introduce the characters and that sort of thing, and they're going to work at their own pace, but it constantly feels a little bit like there's Hollywood on the edges going sort of like, don't forget to make sure that this character, like, this character's motivation is crystal clear. Like,
Oh, sure. Yeah, which again, the Dame never did that. That was not her thing. Like, she wanted you to be confused of who the hero was and who the villain was, and that is okay. And and again, as we're watching Lost, trying to figure out who's good and who's a goodie and who's a baddie is actually part of the, is part of the fun. Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I think, and this is the part of art that you and I like, and Julian and Jack and Rhea and all of us. The reason we like art is that we can have these conversations.
Yeah,
it's thoughtful. It's and again, we're not like, if you like a paint by numbers movie, that's great. There's nothing wrong with like taking your brain out for and again, I love stupid bad action movies. I just love them. But you know who I've been getting back into recently, and I've just and I didn't realize how prolific he was, is Michael J. White. Has never stopped working.
Dude's amazing.
Dude is amazing.
He's a genetic freak, that guy. Dude just keeps going.
And he does, and he writes and directs his own movies.
Yeah.
I just watched one called Better Off Dead or something like that. I don't remember what it's called. Unbelievable. Like, it's so dumb. I believe I said it was like if John Wick and No Retreat or Surrender had a really ugly baby with Rambo Last Blood. That's the movie. It is so, but like, he writes it, he directs it. It's way better than it has any right to be. He's still fucking charismatic as hell, but he also gets like these types of movies. People are like, oh, well, they're action movies, so they're lowbrow. The only kind of action movies we can make now are these ones where like it's the complicated anti-hero or whatever. He's like, sometimes there's just a bad guy who wants to take over the dojo, so I'm just going to do that.
Yes.
And it's going to be really, there's just a bad guy, and it's okay, and this guy's going to do murder.
Yeah.
You know what it is? And I haven't seen the third one yet, but Fuqua's Equalizer trilogy.
Oh.
You're just like, fuck you. Here's what it is. I'm going to make a movie. It's going to be what it is. It's going to be slow. It's going to burn, and you know who the fucking bad guys are.
Yeah.
And the hero, the Equalizer, is bad. He tells you, I'm a monster.
Yeah.
I'm a sociopath too. We're not on his side, but he's also like, he's the Equalizer. That's his whole thing. It's like, he's an avenging angel of justice or whatever. And it's really crystal clear of what's going on. Those movies are good. And he always
third one's great. I actually really enjoyed the third one.
I have it on hold at the library. The thing is he at no point in time does he try to release those as summer blockbusters, because he knows they won't work.
Yeah.
They always get released in the fall. They're for adults. We're not, because he's like, oh, you need me to, it's fucking Denzel Washington's in this movie, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to make a Denzel Washington movie, and you're going to see it or you're not going to see it. And it's going to be smart, and it's going to be well scripted, it's going to be well crafted, and he's going to be a complicated kind of a dick. That character's a bit of a dick, but it's hard, hard to go, whatever. There's no so that's what I love those movies. So those are the close things. I think he's an excellent filmmaker. I'm here to
Yes.
watch whatever. His Magnificent Seven was
Oh,
magnificent. He's
I agree.
never made
Yeah,
I
love that
love
film.
all of his movies, and I know he's found his muse with and if your muse is Denzel Washington, fucking
Yeah.
keep making movies, because I guess
Yeah.
they've got another thing in the pipeline.
Yes.
I'm here for it. And so he's maybe the modern day guy who's like, I can get away, but he also keeps those budgets down. He's not making a $700 million. He's like, I can, which again, $50 million. You and I could retire.
Yeah.
But he's saying, I'm gonna make a $50 million movie. Oh, and Denzel Washington's going to be in it. And the only movies Denzel Washington's ever made sequels to is those Equalizer, right? So that's the only thing I can think of that's modern day. That's like this, like, trust the audience to remember what happened in the previous movies. Trust the audience to remember what happened earlier in the movie. Show, don't tell. That first one, Murder in Home Depot. Oh my God. Like, they set that up from the beginning. You're like, he's sharpening stuff at the beginning. You're not like, hey, remember earlier when I was sharpening blades?
Yeah.
We're like, we saw.
Yeah, we know.
We saw.
Yeah.
You did this whole montage of him just going about his day at work at the Home Depot. And then when you see him in the second one and he's the Uber driver and you see the way he handles the cards. So later when he fucking kills a guy with his credit card, you saw why.
Yes, you've
'Cause
seen
he
the
set it
skills.
up.
Yes.
It's so good. He's the guy. Is he the new
Yeah.
Hitchcock? Is that what we're saying?
Action Hitchcock. Action Hitchcock, maybe.
Hitchcock. Okay, I'm here for. I love him. I think those
Yes.
movies
No,
are
I love his films. Are
fantastic.
great.
Yeah.
Training Day and,
Yeah.
and like say Magnificent Seven and so on and so forth. Like Denzel is
Yeah.
like, and also Denzel's just like, you know, I'm just calling him Denzel like I know him. Like
Like,
Denzel
we know, we're
Washington.
friends.
Yeah.
Well, because and his son is no slouch either. But boy, Denzel is I'll say, to be cheeky, a man apart.
Nice, nice. I like it. Anyway, right.
Anyway, wrap it up. Sorry.
But,
Okay.
yeah, but no,
This is
I
not
agree.
that we love Denzel Washington show, but we could.
Yes, yeah. Maybe that's the next one, the Denzel effect. So I wanted to just highlight is, you know, one of the things that's been interesting about this is just what we go through. I keep thinking about it is, so we've done Death Race, Candyman, They Live, and we're now to Rear Window in the stories. One of the things that so we're 4 into our sort of 7. Was it 6 and then a biggie? Let's call it that, sort of like a bit, you know, 6 and then the big finale. So far, one of the things is, and we've got 2 sort of biggies as well coming up, but every story we've read, we've really sort of been enthused by.
Yeah,
we're like, oh, this is a, you know, granted, I think that of them, The Forbidden, which is Candyman's probably the most well known, it being Clive Barker and so on and so forth. But each one of them we've read and gone like, these are really good stories. Like,
yeah,
you know, and luckily we've found them because, well, firstly because of Real Future, the book we both have a copy of.
Yeah.
But also like because of these films, we're starting now going back. But one of the things that this has been sparking in my head is like, how many amazing short stories are out there that like we just don't know about in all kinds of genres? You know, we've done science fiction, we've done horror, we've done sort of thriller, and I'm going like, man, you know, all of them have been good. We've been really lucky. And so, yeah, I just thought, how is it that, you know, there must be so many short stories I'm never going to get to read that are just a blinder. That it's a real shame.
It is a real shame, and I think there's a few, and that's the thing. You know, you got to go read them. There's a place I subscribe to. One of my short stories was published there. It's called the Fictional Cafe. It's totally free. You can subscribe, and they'll like, if you subscribe to Fictional Cafe, they just like send you something new publishes, and they're just like randos from the mall like me. Some of them are really good, some of them are meh, but it's like every like 2 or 3 days I get a short story in my email from people I've never heard of, and they, you know, and there's probably like 150 people are going to read it, but it's cool. It's just like art, right? Somebody's putting themselves out there. So yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that I do, because you're right, there's so much you're just never going to read.
No.
And it's a crime, but yeah, I think short stories are great, and I think we'll see by the time we get to the end of this, you know, and I agree with what you're saying, is that this is it's an excellent art form. It used to make people money. I watched Unstuck in Time, which is a glorious, I didn't cry. I'm not crying. You're crying. 40-year documentary about Kurt Vonnegut. It is amazing. But, you know, he made a living for 20 years just writing stories for magazines because there was no TV, and then TV killed short stories.
Yeah.
And so TV, and that's the thing. I still think America's greatest science fiction writer is Rod Serling.
We're obviously doing Trekking Through the Twilight Zone. So I'm doing that as well.
Of course.
And
I love that show. I love what you guys do there. Yeah.
And that
he's the greatest
incredible.
American science fiction writer, but he also came from that. Like he adapted some short stories. He was a short story writer. Like he did Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. I think that's how I first experienced that before I read the story, was the Twilight Zone version of it. And, so it's like he understood how to write a short story as a fucking teleplay. He was the first person who's like, oh, I can tell a story in 30 minutes and I will make you not sleep at night. Exactly. So those places, and who did that? Hitchcock.
Yeah.
He had, I used to watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Those were really great. And there was one, that would be an interesting thing. Maybe I'll keep it, but maybe we could see if we could find some of those. And because I do think that is where short stories have gone, is TV, but now even TV
is premium long form. It's all like, no, I agree. But anthology shows, amazing. And I think of like horror. You got the American Horror Stories, but going back to horror's always been doing that sort of thing. But I agree. I just think short stories is an art form that's been video killed the radio star. No, video killed the short story writer, I think.
You're right. That's what it is. Yeah, and a lot of them go write TV scripts now.
Serling and Richard Matheson. I'm going to say, just watching this, you like Richard Matheson as well. Another one just to throw out there. It's amazing. Anyway, next. So we both loved Rear Window, and it had to be Murder. I think that was a bit of a fantastic pairing. But next, we're going to get our ass to Mars.
Oh my God! Are we going to watch both of them or just that one?
I don't know. Well, we're going to be joined as well. We're not just the pair of us. We're actually going to be. We're going to be. Doctor? Yes, the good doctor is going to be joining us. Julian Darius will be joining us. We're going to set it up. We're going to be covering Total Recall, and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, the Philip K. Dick short story. And do we do just the Arnold one, or do we do the Colin Farrell one?
I think we do, because there's three of us. We do the Arnold one, and then we have to at least just have a conversation about how a movie with pretty good actors sucked balls.
Yes, how they took a really good idea and made it pretty awful. But it's been some time.
We'll save it. We'll definitely save it. But yeah, I mean, visually, there's some stuff. I can't wait. Total Recall. Look, Philip K. Dick. He's one of those guys who's always in print. Short story writer who's always in print. But again, he's the guy. He's on the list. Like, as American short story science fiction writer, you're like, well, we've already got Philip K. Dick. You're like, but as we should have Philip K. Dick. We should keep reading him. But what about these other?
Yes,
it's like him and Heinlein, and they're like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, but
it's the same with
one of them is self-serious.
It's the same with like Arthur C. Clarke, isn't it? Like he's up there as well. Sure. They're on that list, and you go like, all right, that's great. But there are others. Yeah.
Right.
Can we talk
this
about?
One I'm excited because We Can Remember It For You Wholesale is amazing. And I'll have to dig into my memory banks because they're so blended right now. I actually think it may have been one I'd actually read before Total Recall. Like, I think I came to the story first because I just PKD, he's one of those things you could find his books in used bookstores. And so it'd be like just picking stuff up him and again with Heinlein.
What I may do, just to add to it, I'm not sure if I'll see if I've got a copy. Total Recall is an interesting one. It's a film based on a book that has a novelization.
There's a novel, and of course you did that again. People go back to the 20th century. You had the novelization of like Alien 3 or something, right?
Oh, I've got loads. I've got loads of novelizations. It's a bit of a weird. They do, but for like weird films, like they do it for some of the comic book films, and all of the Planet of the Apes films had one.
Oh, did they really? The Matt Reeves ones?
The new ones, yeah,
and
a few of this, but they're pretty good.
Nice.
The Predator had one, and it's one of the first. It's one of the only times where I'm like, I'm gonna buy it because I kind of want it to go with the rest of my Predator novelizations, but like I'm gonna just go. Yeah.
Jack and I were just talking, like, because if you just heard Olivia Munn and Keegan-Michael Key are going to be in a Shane Black movie, you're like, whatever that is going to be good, and then you would be wrong.
Yes, yes. Anyway, right, we're going to finish on that point.
Okay.
But because this has been among us, and we are going to be doing Total Recall, and Julian Darius will be joining us for that. So that will be coming out soon. Not before Christmas. I think we'll be doing things. So we'll have this, and then after this, you'll have a Christmas interlude. There'll be some specials. I'm going to do some things over Christmas, and then we'll be back with some more story time. So, Tony, as always, it's always a joy, and it's always a pleasure.
Fun. I love doing this. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. Really appreciate everything, dude. Check out, find us on social media under 20th Century Geek. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/20cg media. We do all kinds of bits and pieces on there. We're doing Tracking to the Twilight Zone, 30-minute thoughts, all kinds of bits and pieces.
Isn't there I believe you've got an essay collection out and a second essay collection.
We do. Okay. I never talk about that. Judging Dread is out. This Christmas coming. Christmas is coming. Go buy Judging Dread, which is a collection of essays discussing Judge Dredd. You're right. And a brand new one. I mean, you contributed to that. The great Tony, and also to the new one, which is called, it was called something, and then we had to change the title because it caused a problem. It's now called Waxing and Waning, Essays on Moon Knight. So there's a Moon Knight collection out there. I think I've made clear that I'm a big Moon Knight fan. Tony did an essay for that as well. These are both from Sequoia. They are available on Amazon and all over the place. I think you can find them.
Sequoia.org. And you and Julian are putting together a Stories Out of Time and Space essay collection.
Yes. I'm currently in the weeds of writing my Event Horizon essay. So, it's good fun. We're writing some good stuff.
Nice, excellent. Well, just people should get on that. And
yes,
I feel like as soon as we stop recording, we'll talk about covering that on my show, maybe.
We will, yes. But what about yourself, Tony? Where can people find you? And your stuff as well. Just Christmas. Come on, get your book out there.
Christmas, arfarina.com. You could go, and actually, if you go to arfarina.com, and you can follow me on social media at Instagram and Facebook on there. But currently, I don't know when this is coming out. Probably you'll have missed it, but you can get ebooks because we have a sale right now on the ebooks through my publisher. But yeah, you can get the ebook or the print book of Welcome to Mansfield. It's excellent Christmas gift. Rhea said, Rhea's mom is not listening to this, mom, as you guys say, but apparently Rhea's giving her mom my book for Christmas. So it's a great gift to give. That's all.
It is awesome. Yes. Go check it out. We're all writing stuff, and it's Christmas.
We are a bunch of creatives. Yeah, we are. It's awesome. Content creator. No, creatives. That's what we are. We're creating. Yeah.
Love it. That's what I am. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you on the next episode.